China is going to have to face the fact at some point that if they're going to inspire the confidence that's necessary to either back their currency and have it be the next world reserve currency, or have a very large part in the SDR or whatever scheme comes forward, they're going to have to lay their cards on the table. And everybody else is going to have to lay their cards on the table. And that means there's going to have to be an accounting of who has how much gold.
Hey guys, thanks so much for pushing play. We really do appreciate it. I have back on the line our good friend, an old friend, and somebody who's been on the show a few times. We're glad to have him back. It's Brother John F. from brotherjohnf.com. Brother John, how are you?
I'm doing great, Sean. It's great to be back on. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming back on. We really appreciate it. And, you know, we follow all of your work. Your latest publicly released update was from April 28th, and it was about the Commitment of Traders report. I want to talk about the significance of that in your mind. You say commercial hedges are dropping off the map, and we're sort of seeing a retread of what we saw in previous run-ups. So I want to talk about that. But let's start wherever you want to start. What are you currently following right now in the precious metals markets?
Probably an interesting one that I just saw today is the breaking story of Bernie Sanders' wife. I don't know if you saw this. This probably came out of the Clinton hit machine. But apparently Bernie's wife was the president of Burlington College, which is now going bankrupt due to a $10 million loan that they took out to buy a bunch of lakefront property from the Diocese of Burlington, which, by the way, at the exact same time was settling a $20 million lawsuit for child sex abuse. So it looks like that's probably going to turn out to be a pretty big story. But, you know, just looking at the politics that's going on and the caliber of the people that we have to choose from, it's really sad that, and, you know, it goes across the banks, it goes across the media. Of course, you're very familiar with the workings of the media, and you know just how the stories are controlled, and just the caliber of people that we have running things is really, really sad. And of course, in the silver and gold markets, it's the same thing. We have, you know, the scandals just keep coming, and I think recently, today or yesterday, we just had reported that the Chinese now are taking over a large vault in London. And I had speculated recently about, you know, the arbitrage trade with the new Chinese exchange opening up, and how, you know, there would be a different dynamic of rather than having Chinese representatives come into London and have to take delivery of their metals and then ship it back, melt it down, make sure it's not fake, and do this stuff. They can actually have people bring the metal over to them. All they have to do is just have a higher price over in China, and the ARBs automatically are going to have to deliver over there. So, you know, more interesting stories as we see the precious metals bleed from the west to the east. What's the end game? I keep going back and forth. You know, there's the Jim Rickards story, you know, that we're going to have some SDR, and then of course you've got Rob Kirby, who pretty much blows Rickards out of the water in his last interview. Don't want to go too deep into that, but there's that story that maybe China is going to be trying to be the dominant player in a new SDR basket. But I kind of think that maybe China wants to have the next international reserve currency, and that's a tall order, because we know that if you do that, then along with that role comes a lot of other things. You know, we're in this situation right now where we have to pay for policing the entire world, and what do we have? Military on the ground in 150 countries and bases in 70 plus countries. Very expensive proposition. So I'm kind of going back and forth trying to decide whether China wants to be part of just a bigger player in a world system, or whether they want to actually be the next reserve currency.
Yeah, you mentioned Rickards, and you know we've long pointed out that Jim Rickards gets his paychecks from the CIA and the Pentagon. Those are clients that he counts among his many clients. And so often when we hear Rickards talk about gold and SDRs, we feel here at SGT Report that 80% of what comes out of its mouth is accurate and 20% is talking points of the establishment. And so we do wonder about the SDR and what's coming. And I may as well get it out there now. I bring it up so often that people are probably tired of hearing about it. But that 1988 cover of The Economist magazine, John, in which we see a phoenix rising from a pile of burning ashes of fiat, and around the phoenix's neck is a gold medallion that says 2018. And the cover of the magazine says, "Get ready for a global currency." We're at 2016 and a half, and the dollar is very long in the tooth. Do you think Rickards may be right that what the powers that be want to do is introduce that global currency in the form of an SDR? Or, like you just said, do you think China will make a play to play more of a centralized role in whatever's coming next? But either way, I suppose it spells doom for the dollar, huh?
Yeah, well, I think that's the biggest question people are trying to figure out. And, a lot of people think that these people that do these things like this Economist cover, I think that cover actually had Hillary on the cover as the president, but maybe they should have put Trump. I don't know. We're going to see. But, these people are very, very proud people that are in the quote-unquote Illuminati, the people who run the world. But, if you take a long look at history, the vast majority of the plans of these people resulted in failure. I mean, just look at the history of the European Union. It started off with the Roman emperors, and then we had Charlemagne, who tried to unite Europe, and then we had 1,000 years under the popes, and then we had Napoleon, we had Hitler, and now we have the EU, and they're convinced they're going to succeed. It kind of looks like it's failing now, and maybe the next success will be perhaps a Muslim caliphate there, the way things are going. But these people don't know the future any more than you or I do. I mean, we know what we plan to do. I mean, I know, I plan to retire at a certain age, or you may plan to take a vacation on a certain date. But it's really presumptuous to say, that what we plan is going to happen, because ultimately, I believe, of course, that God is in charge. But so these people's plans have failed in the past many, many more times than they've succeeded. So it could be that this push for the world currency, or a united Europe being a part of that, and everything they have planned out, it may just fall apart.
Yeah, it may, but let me remind you of this, and just to play devil's advocate here. Do you recall in the 2008 race for the Democratic nomination for president, we had Hillary Clinton against Barack Obama, a really unknown state senator at that point who rose really to prominence out of nowhere. And again, we have so many questions about his ties to the CIA, his family ties. Who is he really? The Social Security number coming from, I think, a state on the East Coast related to somebody who's no longer alive. A lot of questions about Barack Obama. If you recall back at that time, John, there was a news story that broke, I believe from InfoWars, stating that during a period of time on one day when Obama was supposed to be on a plane with all of the journalists following him, the plane took off with those journalists, and Obama was nowhere to be found for 8, 9, 10 hours, 12 hours. Same with Hillary Clinton. And the report at the time was they turned up at the Bilderberg Group meeting where they were told, here's the deal, Obama, you're going to get the nomination in 2008, and sometime in the future, 2012 or 2016, Hillary, it'll be your turn. And I just wonder if these people don't orchestrate things to the point where they do get what they want more often than not. And it makes me wonder, given the litany of Hillary Clinton's crimes, which are now so obvious and so far-reaching that she should be in prison, is it even possible that that woman could actually make it into the White House?
Anything's possible. I personally believe that the Clintons are probably just an extension of the Bush for better words, we'll say Bush crime family.
I agree.
And so, you trace the history. We had Reagan kind of cut short halfway through, then Bush, then Clinton, then Bush, then Obama, and they're going to try to give us Clinton. I mean, I think they probably pick all the candidates. They probably pick Donald Trump as well. And maybe this whole thing is kind of like a arranged outsider sort of scenario that they've planned out. It's kind of like their, their fallout scenario if everything fails. And, you know, it makes some sense. I mean, if you think about, you know, Trump being somebody who might preside over the bankruptcy of the United States, you know, kind of like the movie Idiocracy. You know, you have a professional wrestler as president, you have a like kind of a media cartoon personality as president, you know, and then they're drinking Gatorade and feeding the plants. I mean, it's just crazy. It's almost like, you know, we're living in a Simpsons episode or something. I think it may just be that these are different factions. I don't know what the factions are. Everybody thinks they know, you know, who's behind everything. We have, you know, rabid anti-Semites who blame the Jews if it rains, you know. Mm-hmm. And then we have, you know, people who swear that it's the CFR and the Bilderbergers. I honestly can't tell you, you know, who's running the show, except maybe the church lady could tell you who's behind everything. But, you know, I think they're all kind of shady characters. I would be surprised, though, if Hillary actually wins. You know, I think the economists may just end up with egg on their face on this one.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, I thought the same thing about Trump. I mean, he may be a steam release valve, right, put into play by the establishment to the degree that they needed to head off what is quickly devolving into revolutionary feelings around the globe as people are sick and tired of the fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the 1% taking everything and leaving nothing but crumbs for the rest of us. I mean, my God, look what's going on in Venezuela, John. I just want to get your opinion on that. Is there any better example of the chaos and absolute horror that can evolve when we see a hyperinflationary collapse, when we see a currency hyperinflate into worthlessness?
Well, I've been covering Venezuela for quite some time, and you know, Venezuela is a really bad situation. Now, a lot of the conspiracy theorists have said, well, it's the U.S. trying to undermine them. But I mean, if you just, yes, you know, you have to use Occam's razor, and there's something behind there. But just using Occam's razor on it's very simple. I mean, when you have somebody who makes an order that supermarkets can only charge such and such amount for food, and farmers can only charge such and such amount for their crops, then, you know, you're going to have shortages. That's just basic economics. And this bus driver, you know, Nick Maduro, who hears from, you know, former Hugo Chavez, birds talk to him, and it's the spirit of Chavez. I mean, this guy's a nutcase. You know, he needs to go. That's the bottom line. And the president of Colombia has pretty much said, you know, it's looking like we may need to move in here and just remove this nutcase from power. But, you know, it's an example of socialism, which is a completely bankrupt philosophy. But unfortunately, the alternative that it's always compared to is crony capitalism. You know, we never really have a decent free market comparison. I mean, it's sad that communist China, probably on the lower levels, has more free markets. There's probably more free markets in Asia and some of the Asian emerging economies, say, like, you know, Thailand and Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam, than there is anywhere in the West, because we're just continuing to go to the left and a suppression of markets. But I mean, Chavez's family, they've looted billions of dollars out of that country. I mean, I think read one article said his daughter has an estimated net worth of $4 billion or something like that. And then there are other former cronies. So, you know, it's like the pattern's the same on the left and on the right. We don't have a left. We don't have a right. I mean, you mentioned Obama. You know, as far as what the left was, wasn't the left anti-war? You know?
At one point.
I mean, how'd that work out?
Yeah, at one point. You know, that's one of the things that really is my ultimate pet peeve, and I've said this a million times. You know, if you used to be a quote-unquote conservative and Bush was your guy, well, when he did all measures of unconstitutionality with the signing of the Patriot Act, the John Warner Defense Authorization Act, the Military Commissions Act, invading Iraq on the back of WMD lies, invading Afghanistan, the plans for which were already on the president's desk prior to 9/11, I mean, you have to be intellectually honest and say, these guys are not my guys. These guys are criminals. And the same is true if you are a quote-unquote liberal. Why can't these people be intellectually honest about the crimes of Barack Obama and the crimes of Hillary Clinton, John? It absolutely enrages me that people are so intellectually dishonest and so willing to root for their team even when their team is corrupt to the core.
Well, let's look at the other side. I mean, let's look at John Boehner, crybaby Boehner, and now we've got Paul Ryan in there. And you would think that probably the main thing that swept the Republicans into two elections, 2010 and 2012, was basically the Tea Party, whose really only point was we need fiscal restraint. We need to stop growing the size of government. Now you look at the richest zip codes in the country now. They're all around Washington, D.C. We've got government workers making $100,000 pensions. What have the Republicans done to stop this? They've done absolutely nothing. What did they do to stop Obamacare? I mean, it's crazy. Both sides seem to be completely controlled. And that's the thing. At least Trump is trying to resonate with that message. He's trying to point out that these people don't represent the people they claim. Now, he's claiming to be an outsider, self-funded billionaire. And, it's sad that he actually has a more legitimate claim and kind of like the cleanest dirty shirt. But when you compare him to the characters that are out there, it's really true.
Well, you're right about that, and I think that the bottom line is that people, even if they don't know what the Federal Reserve is, what a central bank is, who's behind these banks, who owns them, they know something's wrong. There's a rising temperature of anger in this country, on the right and the left, but this rising anger is palpable, and people are upset. They know the government is corrupt. And even if they can't necessarily put their finger on why and specifically talk about the things that we talk about, they know something's very, very wrong, which I think is why Trump is experiencing this incredible support. And Bernie Sanders, too, because the system is fixed. The mainstream media mockingbird liars are doing the bidding of the establishment, and people know it. People really are starting to recognize it. Diatribe over. Well, let me ask you this. Before we lose you, I want to talk about what's going on over at the COMEX, the commitment of traders' significance in your mind, which you did talk about in your last public video. What's going on in the COMEX? We see from TF Metals that the actual number of registered bars to paper bars on the COMEX is somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 to 1. To me, it represents the same level of corruption that we just talked about in politics.
Well, the COMEX is a really strange case because I think I saw a study once that said that of the silver that's mined every year, less than 5% of that silver is actually delivered on the COMEX. So how does the COMEX set prices if 95% of all the trades on the COMEX are just people trading back and forth? And that gets to the Commitment of Traders report, because the Commitment of Traders report breaks it down amongst commercial hedgers, large speculators, and small speculators. And the commercial hedgers are kind of disappearing. That category includes, of course, people who produce silver, and then the other side is people who use silver. So that's the real market, the people that sell the real physical commodity and the people that consume the real physical commodity. Right. That shouldn't be 5%. That should be 95%.
That's right.
But the large speculators, which is the number that's growing, and that number has significantly increased as silver has started to form the bottom that it's forming, whereas the commercial trader the people who take delivery, that number has dropped significantly since silver has started to bottom. But so that's an indication to me that there's a possibility that some of those large speculators could flip at any point. And really, it's been a possibility for the last even 10 years, even since the SLV was created to divert potential silver demand into some fake paper thing that is controlled by Wall Street. But I mean, the raw numbers are really simple. I mean, let's just say silver's $20. It's not there yet, but at $20, and be generous and say there's $1 billion pulled out of the ground every year. What's that, $20 billion? Is that a rounding error on the Clinton Foundation's interest? I mean, the amount of money is so tiny. The question people should be asking is not when the COMEX has, been busted, but why it hasn't. And there have been rumors for a long time. You've got Jim Willie types and others, but you can dig into the rumors, and there have been a lot of rumors about people in mini contracts in silver that decided to take delivery, got a mysterious phone call. Why do you want silver? Mm-hmm. Why are you taking delivery?
Yeah, we've heard about cash settlements with a premium too.
I would imagine that, hey, here's a lucrative business. Let's let's take delivery of silver on the COMEX, wait for the phone call, get the cash delivery, and make ourselves a quick 10 or 20% profit. But I bet you if you started doing that over and over again, you'd probably wind up in a pair of cement boots somewhere. So, why did Warren Buffett have to, dump his silver? Why did Bill Gates mysteriously back out? Because we know the answer to these questions. The market is so tiny that anybody with a decent amount of money, whether it's a pension fund, whether it's a sovereign wealth fund, whether it's any number of the thousands of billionaires on earth, they could destroy the COMEX, any one of them, by simply taking delivery of whatever silver they have there. Yeah, it's not happening.
Yeah, that's right. And, you mentioned earlier in the interview that Barclays, I don't think we said that specifically, Barclays is selling its precious metals vault to a Chinese banking conglomerate. And, we see over there at the Shanghai Futures Exchange this incredible tens of millions of ounces of physical silver inventory being built to challenge what J.P. Morgan claims they have, which is dubious. Who knows what J.P. Morgan has? We can't trust anything J.P. Morgan says. But what's going on at the SGE and the Shanghai Futures Exchange specifically is extremely dramatic. The world can see physical metal going to China.
Sure. Well, if you read Market Wizards in the interview with Ed Sakota, which I've probably read 100 times, one of the most brilliant technical traders that's ever lived, they asked him about gold, and he said, well, gold tends to be dug up, moved, and buried about every 100 years or so. And that's a very profound statement, because what is behind that is that with gold and silver not so much because it's been demonetized, but certainly with gold, there's a time when regimes change that people actually have to put their cards on the table, okay? Mm-hmm. You have to prove what you have. Now, the U.S. has been bluffing for a very, very long time. We know that Germany said, well, can we see one card? Can we get a peek? No, you can't get a peek. So China is going to have to face the fact at some point that if they're going to inspire the confidence that's necessary to either back their currency and have it be, the next world reserve currency, or have a very large part in the SDR or whatever scheme comes forward, they're going to have to lay their cards on the table. And everybody else is going to have to lay their cards on the table. And that means there's going to have to be an accounting of who has how much gold. How do you do that? Well, you're going to have independent audits, independent inspections. I don't really know what the logistics of that are, but at some point, all that gold that is buried, as Ed Sakota says, is going to be dug up, and there's going to have to be an audit to find out who has the cards and who is bluffing.
That's right. And guys, as you know, the last audit of Fort Knox gold was in the 50s. I mean, that alone is absolutely stunning. The U.S. government does not want an audit of Fort Knox gold. That should beg the question, why? And I want to leave everybody with this. John, I don't know if you saw the headline over at Silver Doctors. Our buddies over there posted this one, stunner. Saudis forcing U.S. Navy to use silver bullion to pay for fuel, a Jim Willey claim, which is really sensationalist. And we posted it because we saw that Silver Doctors had posted that item. So we shared it at SGT Report. Only after sharing it did I get a chance to listen to the interview. And I think it's a very dubious claim. Let me play for you guys the specific soundbite from that interview. And then, John, I'd love to get your thoughts.
One of our main exports now is stale air and containers. In addition to exporting diabetes, fraudulent bonds, and war material. Now, the U.S. Navy in the Persian Gulf right now is being refused the dollar to buy the diesel for the ships in the U.S. Navy. They must pay silver bullion.
Oh, my goodness.
This is already reaching crescendo levels.
So, John, I just wanted to play that because we took a little bit of criticism at SGT Report for even posting that headline, which, of course, appeared at Silver Doctors first. And then I corrected the headline and added the editor's note that people could listen to his specific claim at 17:54:55 into that interview. And it is a very sensationalist claim. But also, there's some truth there. The world is turning against the dollar, John, and I think it's just a matter of time before nation states like Saudi Arabia won't take or won't accept Federal Reserve notes for settlement.
Yeah, I mean, it's starting to play out. This Saudi thing is a big thing. I mean, it's hard to speculate what's behind this. Of course, we know this whole 911 thing, and there's another news story today. The FBI is going to release or keep hidden 80,000 pages of connections to the Saudis to 911. I mean, come on, this is stupid. We know that thing was a hoax and a false flag. And if the Saudis had anything to do with it, then I'd like to know how the Saudis caused all of our Air Force to stand down. It's stupid. Anybody believes that nonsense. But something is going on behind the scenes between Saudi Arabia and the United States. That may be some truth to what Jim Woolley's saying. You got to remember that Jim Woolley, he has various sources, and I'm sure some of his sources are probably halfway government, halfway moles. Who knows? And maybe there's some truth to it. And a lot of this stuff that we report, is based on rumor. But there is something going on with Saudi Arabia, and I suspect that it's possible that the Saudis don't toe the line. They're going to be the next. Maybe we're going to add one to Wesley Clark's list, and they're going to find themselves overthrown and have another regime put in there.
Yeah, you might be right about that. Definitely there are things going on behind the scenes. I've often said what's going on behind the scenes is far more dramatic than any Hollywood script. And I just actually want to say one last thing, too. This dawns on me. I was having a conversation by email with a new friend on YouTube. The channel is The Silver Antidote, and he was talking about a show that I watched the entire first season of called Mr. Robot. And, of course, in that show, John, this anonymous group takes down the global financial system, takes down Wall Street. And now we see everywhere in the media, we see it all over the place. We see news breaking that Chinese hackers, Russian hackers, or this latest thing, Anonymous took down some ATMs in New York City. Do you see, as I do, this narrative playing out, and they're getting ready to blame Anonymous, Chinese hackers, Saudi hackers, or Russian hackers for the collapse when it comes? I think they're preparing their narrative, and so that when the system goes down, they have a fall guy. Your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I think that's correct. I'm correct. I mean, I've covered Mr. Robot in past updates. But, this story goes back. I mean, if you look at Zero Hedge, it's based on Tyler Durden and Fight Club. And the whole premise behind Fight Club was that there was a secret army of people who were going to bring down the financial system. And now we have these reports that Anonymous is supposedly attacking these Federal Reserve websites through DDoS attacks, and I don't know how much impact it's going to have to bring down the Fed's website, But I mean, who is Anonymous? I mean, seems to me pretty obvious that it's some COINTELPRO infiltrated group that they're going to use if they need to create that scapegoat. What's the scapegoat going to be? Is it going to be war? I'd rather have it be the hackers, to tell you the truth. Because if it's the hackers, then a whole bunch of people don't have to die. We can just blame some anonymous hackers. The financial system crashed, and guess what? Hey, we didn't have the money, guys. Sorry, we lied. Oh, now we know why all the agencies need guns and bullets, because it's going to end up being like Venezuela for a while. But I hope that scenario plays out rather than them starting some global conflagration so that they can point over there and say, hey, look, shiny object. Don't look at the crimes we've committed.
Yes, it's a good point. One way or the other, this system is going to come down, and we hope it comes down in some way that is not littered with global bloodshed, and certainly we want to avoid World War III. So these are troubling times, and that's why we like to have these conversations, guys. Brother John F., a truth teller. Brother John, can you remind people of where they can find your website and your subscription work?
Sure. The website is Silver for the People, and the domain is brotherjohnf.com. It's also the same thing on YouTube. We have a member site. It's brotherjohnf.biz, where people can subscribe. It's $150 a year, and I put out videos about every 2 or 3 or 4 days, and then every month or so I release one publicly so people can see what type of information we're providing.
Well, we love your work, and I really do appreciate your time, John. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
It was great being on. Thanks again, Sean.
Thank you, sir. And guys, thanks for your support at sgtreport.com. thephaser.com, where I handpick videos for you, and thelibertymill.com. Real news 24/7. Thanks so much for listening. God bless.